the battle between good and evil, so to speak, isn't between states, and it's not between individuals precisely, although it manifests itself at those levels. It's an internal battle, a moral battle that happens inside people. And so people have a broad capacity for malevolence and for benevolence. And that's a terrible war for people. And it's a terrible thing to understand and realize. In fact, often when people realize their capacity for malevolence, if they're not prepared for it, they develop post-traumatic stress disorder. So that happens to soldiers in battlefields. So they go out, they're innocent guys, naive guys, young guys, and they go out onto a battlefield and they get put in a really stressful situation, and they step outside themselves and they do something unbelievably vicious and brutal, and then they're broken. They can't take that manifestation of themselves and put it with like Iowa corn-fed, nice guy. And no wonder, because one is like a flesh-eating chimpanzee on a war rampage, and the other is, a relatively well brought up and polite farm boy from the middle of the United States. It's like, how in the world are you going to put those two things together? Well, you can't. That's post-traumatic stress disorder. And to treat that, my experience with post-traumatic stress disorder is that you have to teach people a philosophy of evil, of good and evil, because otherwise they can't recover. And I've had, by the way, in the last 4 months, I've had 2 letters from soldiers with PTSD, and I met 2 personally who said that watching my lectures had brought them back together, because they couldn't understand what they had become before looking deeply at their malevolence. Now, so I would say, with regards to this movement, this postmodern movement, the malevolent aspect of it, there's a couple of them. One, it's unbelievably authoritarian. I got a letter today from a university student in Italy. I don't know what university, but she'd been having kind of a flame war on Facebook with a social justice warrior. And at the end, she recommended that this particular social justice warrior seek out a local mental health counseling unit and put a link to it in the exchange. And then she got a letter from the university. I guess the other person, the SJW type, turned her in, but she got a letter from the university saying that violated university policy and constituted harassment, and that she should seriously consider retracting it. And that, future employers might be looking at what she posted, and it was inappropriate to put that on a public site. And it's like, I thought, wow, how could you be so clueless as a administrator, say, to think that your monitoring of your students' private utterances, you're monitoring it at an institutional level, and your intervention and threat at an institutional level is less dangerous than letting 2 students, troll each other on a public social forum. It's just, I don't know what to think about it. It's just unbelievable. It's happening all over the place, this sort of thing. And so there's the authoritarian element to it, which is I think it's a hatred of competence, because competence produces hierarchies that aren't based on power. I think it's a hatred of clear intellect.
A hatred of clear intellect, how so? What do you mean by when you say clear intellect?
Well, you have a clear intellect, as far as I'm concerned. I think that's why you're so popular. It's because you pay attention and say what you see, and you're not too concerned about doing anything other than that. I mean, of course you have an agenda, because everyone has an agenda. You can't help but have an agenda if you're alive. But you can temper the agenda. Like, you can be clued in enough to try to listen and learn and watch and pay attention to what your own senses are telling you and try to articulate that. And that's what the logos is, technically speaking. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because Jacques Derrida described Western culture in a famous phrase. He described it as phallogocentric, P-H-A-L logo, L-O-G-O centric, phallogocentric. And it needs to be brought down. Well, the phallus part, that's male. The logo part, that's logos. Now, that's partly logic, because the word logic comes from the word logos. But logos is a much, much older concept than logic. Like, logos is... It's essentially, it's a theological concept, and that's where things get complicated. But you could describe it as as the manifestation of truth in speech. And the postmodernists, they don't like any of that.